Well, as you can clearly see, I have toned down the skylight a bit so that I can test out the normal lighting that will be going into this level. As far as more relevant changes are concerned, you'll also notice that I put in some terrain to serve as a ground for the tracks to sit on. Now, it didn't occur to me until, well, last night that I in fact could create a terrain that's a long, skinny terrain instead of a perfect square. So to get around the idea of having most of the terrain invisible, and also to save a little bit on production effort, what I wound up doing was taking the same exact terrain and duplicating it across the whole length of the track. And then to make sure it would match, I basically just took every other one and mirrored the terrain so that they would match end to end. Unfortunately, this had some strange effect on the lighting where all of those mirrored ones wound up being perfectly dark. Why this happened, I do not know, and it served as a lot of frustration until I got to the very end of the development of this map. Over here on the docks, you'll see that I also added in some gates. Now, I actually wanted it to be one larger opening with the rest of the gates closed off, but I found that with this particular choice of static mesh, which was about the only one I could find that seemed reasonable to use, having two open squares right next to each other left a visible column between them, because that was the very edge of that open gate. So I wound up having to have the two open gates be separate from each other, so it doesn't look like there's some large metal pole going down the middle of this opening, which ideally, when it's all opened, should look like it's one giant opening, which would make it easy for loading in all the cargo. But I can't really say for certain how great of a difference this really has on the gameplay. I thought it'd look nice to have the one single opening, but I guess having the two openings makes for some more dynamic and engaging gameplay. So I'll accept it. I'll leave it with that. Now, I had to rearrange the position of the corridors in the office to match with this, with the inbound dock. If you take a look back to the original design that I had, the first few ones that were molded entirely out of BSP, you'll see that I had intended for the office to come out onto a second level in both of the warehouse sections. However, when I started to form this actual section, I decided I didn't want it to look exactly identical to the other one, so I left it with a lower roof, rather than having that curved warehouse type roof. And then when I got this far, I finally realized that meant that all of those second floor openings from the office would not be able to go into any second floor in this room, because that second floor in the office is higher than this room. I made a revision by adding just a little bit of extra height into one section of the room where we have this one ladder that comes in here, which I thought worked really well. But if you also look at those original corridors that I had laid, you'll see that this particular side had two upper floor entrances to it, and I was not about to put a second staircase just a few feet down the road from the first one. So I wound up moving it over to this hallway over here and had it sitting up above this corridor, and this one I always referred to as the fire exit because it's not some official looking exit out into an area that has a significant staircase or any sort of manner to get to it. So if this depot were actually in production, it would be sort of a Winchester House looking door that just loaded several feet above the ground. So I figure it's just emergency exit only. And then to get it to work in this particular section, I just threw a crate underneath it, a few crates till you can jump up to it, and there we go. It's mostly designed for exit instead of entrance, but there we go. We have something on the upper floor that leads out of that section. Final detail I would like to go over is how I added in a lot of the supports for the catwalks and other such details for the outbound section. Mostly it's just adding in the various obstacles to be evading around. The supports I added in for the catwalks are very large, and the reason I did this was so that I could disguise the fact that I have no static mesh for the end of those handrails. So what else are those handrails going to do? I don't even have curves for those handrails. The only thing I have are straight handrails, which only works if I have a straight catwalk, which I don't. So the supports, aside from being reasonable to have, so it looks like this catwalk system is actually held up by something, also are conveniently placed right at the edges of these handrails, so that these handrails will actually end where they would be reasonable to do so. I thought it was significant to add in some sort of walls around the edges of the catwalks. Not merely the railing, but also something to obstruct a significant portion of fire across one side. And here you will notice this particular section seems to get very similar to the original concept sketch that I developed a long time ago. I just so happened to have the walls and covering just about what I originally drew up when I was imagining what this section would look like. I'm really pleased with that. It's not exact. I'm not trying to make it exact. It's just something to convey that I actually do have the basic form that I was pursuing from the beginning. And that's pretty much all the changes I made. Well, let's see. I also added in this fleet of trucks. I couldn't find any actual truck static mesh, so I basically took that car decoration that's ideally supposed to be used with distances, and I covered it up with a container static mesh and some giant wheels. So hey, it looks like a truck. Not the best truck in the world, so most of them are sitting out where you're not really going to be playing at, so they're just decoration, but I'm still fairly pleased at what I was able to produce considering the limitations I have. And that's it. Ta-da!